All right, we are recording. Hey, Belinda, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who tuning in online, my name's Kyle. I'm a part of the team here at BridgeWay, and this conversation is a part of a number of conversations that we have organized to help equip people who are dealing with the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and all the things that go along with it. We've already had a discussion to talk about strategies for school. And today I'm very excited because we have Belinda Shirk here to talk to us about mental health. She's a counselor in our community. And so with that, Belinda, would you just say hello, introduce yourself, and let us know who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. No, thank you for having me, Kyle. I'm thrilled to be here and so excited that you guys are wanting to talk about these things and resource the people in the church. And so, my name is Belinda Shirk. I'm a native Texan. I am a mom to one 23-year-old daughter. I enjoy travel, anything that involves the water. Give me a paddle board, a boat, hiking around water, anything like that. And one of the most exciting things in my life right now is that I have a fairly new grand dog.
That's awesome.
And so he's a bundle of fun. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I owner of Truth Point Counseling in Grapevine, Texas.
Excellent. And tell us how you got into counseling. How long have you been counseling, or maybe the practice? Maybe that's the same question.
Yeah, so I graduated in 2011, so been counseling since then, about 9 years. And really it was, I was in my mid-20s and had my first significant loss in my life. It was my grandmother. Had no idea about grief, how to navigate that, actually sought out counseling myself. And was really surprised through that process that we addressed the grief. We talked about the loss of my grandmother, but we also talked about a lot of other things that obviously were really important. And so I as the therapeutic relationship came to an end, I said to the therapist, one of these days I want to be sitting in your chair, doing what you're doing, helping people who are sitting in my chair. So really. Just wanting to give back and feeling like, gosh, if I could help people sitting in this chair, it wouldn't be all in vain that I've experienced the things in my life. So I did. When I got the courage, I went to grad school and did what I knew God was leading me to do for many years and completed that degree. And I've been here since. Yeah.
And so why don't you walk us through, I'm sure you handle a myriad of issues. What are some of the things that you specialize in? And again, knowing that you probably do a whole bunch of other things outside of that specialty.
I do. Well, so my background is addiction, and I worked in patient addiction treatment for several years. I was a family therapist in an inpatient facility here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I helped families understand how to navigate early recovery for their loved ones. And we treated a host of addictions. When I opened, then I went to manage their intensive outpatient program and transitional living programs. So those are kind of a step down in inpatient treatment. And when I opened my private practice almost 4 years ago, that the addiction component followed me in my private practice. And I still work with a lot of addiction recovery, and I specialize in betrayal. I have women's groups here in my private practice, women who have experienced the pain of betrayal on many levels, and a lot of that has to do with addiction.
Sure.
And I also love to walk individuals through the grief process. As it pertains to loss and loss of a loved one.
Okay. So one of the things I want to jump in and start talking about the COVID stuff in particular. But before we get there, I think this is something that I've noticed as a pastor that maybe you could speak to, is it seems that certain Christians in particular can be hesitant to talk to counseling or to pursue mental health from a clinical person like yourself, wanting instead to rely on maybe a pastoral care or other things there just seems to be in our community. It's probably gotten better, but there seems to be a resistance there. Is that something that I'm perceiving correctly, that you've noticed? And maybe let's just talk about that a little bit before we jump into the COVID specific stuff.
Well, I would say you're not alone in that, if that's been your experience. Certainly, I see that Christians can feel a sense of guilt, maybe if they can't remedy their struggle with by prayer alone and a certain level of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things I like to tell people is, of course, that's a huge part of any kind of healing process, right? But we also have to consider that based on maybe childhood traumas, past experiences in life, our body and our brain learns to release chemicals at a certain rate that affect how we cope, how we handle stress, and things like that. So oftentimes, considering that is very helpful with prayer and faith. I do see that level of guilt and a hesitancy there as well.
Yeah. So what would you say, just briefly, what is the relationship between pastoral care and professional counseling, and how can those two things work together? I know for me, I'm the first one to say, hey, I'm going to have a meeting with you. I'm going to talk. We're going to pray. We're going to look to scripture. But I rarely end that meeting without referring them to counseling. So how do you see that working, or how could we do better in the community to look at healing more holistically, spiritually, clinically, et cetera?
Sure. Well, I kind of look at you guys as the first line, the pastoral team. And my guess is that individuals in the church are going to feel comfortable coming to you to share their current struggle, right? And so you guys know the needs of the people, and understanding, as you say that, I have to say this, I'm reminded. So I was raised as a PK, a preacher's kid. And so then when I became a counselor, my dad would say to me, like, Belinda, I often don't know what to do with couples. They'll start having conflict in my office, and they go down these rabbit trails of all these issues they have with one another. And I just end up going with them. And all of a sudden we've been there for 2 hours, and I feel like I haven't helped them at all. And so I would just say, when you know that something is above your skill level, know the therapist in the community that can help the individuals, whether they specialize in marriage or whatever the issue at hand is. I too am not an expert at everything. And so I like to know other therapists who aren't maybe the expert in that area, so I can refer people to them.
Well, as someone who's never struggled with that, I always have the right things to say, and I can always just usually fix all the problems, but it's good for anyone else who's listening who maybe can't do that. So, but no, that's fantastic. And it's really great to know sometimes, even to think about the fact that just because you're a counselor, that doesn't make you the authority for every type of issue, and that you even need to make referrals. And that's helpful to me. And I'm sure it's probably helpful to other folks listening too as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a great thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, so let's start talking about COVID-19, and I don't even know where to begin, right? So, and you're the person who we can talk to about all of our problems, and you can solve all of our problems, right?
Right.
But maybe let's start talking about the global effect, or the larger effects of COVID-19 on mental health in general. And what are you hearing? You mentioned something about when we first had this conversation, you said, well, let's see if I can find some time because I'm so booked and everyone else is. So it seems like there's more. So why don't you just share about what you're seeing right now in the community?
Yes. Well, when we first started talking about this topic, I didn't know where to start either, Kyle. So one of the things that therapists are seeing right now, and I try to check in with my colleagues and my good friends, and we try to check on one another for our own self-care, right? And everyone really feels like right now that we are in the trenches for so many reasons. Elevation in anxiety, depression, man, our couples who went into a more of a quarantine situation, not okay. It certainly didn't make things better.
Right.
And so we have, people working from home now in the same space, couples in the same space, trying to work from home in a different environment, meet deadlines, homeschool their kids, make sure their kids are in their virtual classroom right now. Not even being able to meet with your therapist face to face, and that being done virtually. So there are so many things we could talk about as far as how COVID is impacting families, individuals, couples, children.
Yeah. And so what would you say, one of the big phenomenons that we've seen is just a general sense of isolation, right? Where even as things are normalizing, I've just noticed that sometimes even when I'm around people, it doesn't even feel the same. Like I'm a hugger.
Yeah.
Like even for me, I that physical interaction with people. So what's the effect psychologically of isolation on people?
Yes. So I think that's a great place to start with this conversation. And one of the things that I'm talking to my clients about is just even understanding, and I won't go into the neuroscience of all of this, but the HPA axis in our brain. It's
HPA axis?
Axis, yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the thalamic, the pituitary, the adrenal. We'll
Okay.
just talk about that to keep it simple. But it's really kind of our threat response system. All right. So it serves us well when we, let's say my smoke alarm goes off in my home, and that system in my body and my brain, it works together to tell me, be on alert. You are not safe and you need to act quickly.
Right.
Okay. And so when we know there is a public health crisis, and we're aware of that right now, and our brain's activated in that HPA axis is activated, it is constantly telling us, okay, this is the time to protect, right? Wear your mask, stay 6 feet away from people. It's not the time that our brain's telling us that, hey, your surroundings are safe. So all in all, how is that impacting? Well, when we are more isolated, and let's face it, I believe God created us for connection and community, and we're not experiencing a lot of that right now. And we're staying in that activated sense. There's sleep disturbance going on. Our brain's not telling us, oh, this is time to get some really good restful sleep and detach from your worries and anxieties, right? So what do we do when we don't get good sleep? Just for starters, well, maybe we increase our caffeine intake. We're sleepy during the day, which can really affect our mood, our ability to concentrate, things like that.
So we're collectively on a giant fire drill. And so even in the moments where, we know that there's nothing coming, our brain is telling us you're not safe. You can't relax. You cannot get a break.
Yes.
Wow.
And I hear individuals even saying now exactly what you said, like, well, I'm getting a little more comfortable to venture out a little bit more. But it's really strange because when I'm out and about, I still kind of feel this weird sense of don't get close, keep your distance. People aren't safe. You never know who's
right. Well, no. And that's an interesting way, because even now we're going out is something new and strange and potentially hazardous that I'm going to go do. Like that's not going out. That's, at least like on a psychological level to some degree.
Right. And you go out, and how many times have you walked to the entrance of a store or what have you and realized my mask is still in my car. I've got to walk. I mean, this is different.
Yeah. No, it totally is.
Operating the same way.
And so, but that's on a physiological level. activating a response from your body that does not just makes you feel it, but it is on a physiological level affecting you. So yeah, you are not able to rest to the same degree. You're not able to, whatever else it might be.
Right. You know, when we're not in that part of the brain, right, that says, and this is the part of the brain we've heard that's really the fight, flight,
Yep.
freeze response. And so, yes, it's not telling us, our brain's not telling us this is the time to create meaningful connection, to reach out to people, to nurture relationships, right? It's telling us keep your distance.
Interesting. Well, and that makes perfect sense, because that's exactly what we're feeling. And it's, but one of the things that you mentioned though, that's related to that is some of the, and this is kind of a general relational dynamic. And I wonder if it's part of that isolation too, where you mentioned people feeling unsafe, but some people do feel safe. And some people also come at this whole thing that this is a conspiracy and there's probably a level of anxiety, or even I've noticed even anger towards the whole situation. And I've been there. I've probably felt that at times. So is there a communal effect to that? Is there a brain cause to that as well? And knowing that we're not taking one side or another, we just know that people are on a whole different spectrum here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think for starters, yes, when the brain's activated, it's not telling us that it's time to trust other people, right? And you're right. There are so many different opinions out there about this. And I even have couples, it's been interesting lately, couples in my office having conflict over their differing opinions about this specifically, realizing that they're having more conversations, there's more togetherness, right? And they're having these conversations. And I have had a lady a couple of weeks ago say to me, I don't even know who my husband is right now. We had a conversation, it was politically charged, and we're realizing we have differing opinions about things, and we didn't know this. So yeah, I mean, it's starting in the home, even between couples.
And so, but what you're saying to me, or what I'm hearing maybe, is that those responses, whether that's isolating and having fear, or maybe even anger, it might be tied to that same part of our brain that tells us one way or another, this is not okay. Yes. Don't trust, even if don't trust the mask, or don't trust people who wear masks, whatever it might be. Yes. It's coming from maybe a similar place in our brains.
Yes. And anger, keep in mind too, that anger can serve a healthy purpose for us, right? Sure. It can alert us to the fact that maybe there's an injustice going on that we need to respond to. It can tell us we need to act quickly and protect ourselves. And so, yes, certainly that's part of the brain being activated in this axis and this system that's created. And it's really creating a feedback system, right, when it's activated. And so certainly anger is a part of that. And, and I've talked to individuals and couples lately about, man, you don't have to show up right now for every argument that you're invited to, because it feels like.
Can you say that again? We're going to make that the headline for this whole thing. This is worth the whole conversation.
Yeah. Give yourself permission not to show up for every argument. Grace for yourself and grace for others right now, because it's no secret that people are more heightened, and the anxiety and anger is elevated.
Well, and this probably goes without saying that, and it's kind of related to this, but the whole social media phenomenon, at least for me, I've just noticed on Facebook in particular, which is like the scourge of my existence, yet I'm still on it. It seems to also be heightened there, because everything now is so charged, and it was probably that way to begin with, but it seems like the COVID thing has added another layer, another thing we can argue about. And again, now it's kind of, I've noticed that there's also, it's helped to polarize us even further. And it seems like the not showing up for every argument, it's hard to do it, because you're somehow participating. Like when I scroll through my newsfeed, I'm probably participating, right? Yeah. In some way, right? Even if I'm not commenting. I'm in that, right? That's got to be doing something to my brain.
Right, it is. And that's one of the things that I think is really important for us to remember right now. We can make choices that feed the anxiety of a public health crisis, that feed the anger, that feed these things, or we can make choices that nourish us, help to de-escalate, help to self-regulate, and things like that. And so I think it's really important right now that we limit our exposure to those things. I heard it said that really, if you listen to 30 minutes of the news right now, you've heard everything you're going to hear for the day, unless something substantial happens. So give yourself, however you feel at the end of that, scrolling through Facebook or listening to the news, be mindful about how that is impacting you right now. How do you feel
Right.
at the end of that?
Yeah.
How do you feel like you're participating? Does it seem to, offer self-care and joy and self-regulation or not?
Right. No, that's very good. So questions about COVID specifically, and again, maybe it's obvious, and you've touched on some of these things already, but people are struggling obviously directly with COVID. People who've been infected, or the job loss or something of that nature. But how has COVID exacerbated other issues that were already there in the first place?
Yeah. Well, one, if we go back to couples, so maybe a lot of what we're seeing with couples is, Kyle, if they didn't go into quarantine and more time together and more togetherness in a good place, in a healthy place in their marriage, it seems to be exacerbating that.
Yeah.
They're together, they're in the same space, they're having to navigate conflict in an escalated sense. And so that, for starters. One of the things too that's been interesting is just even couples who have gone into the whole COVID thing and this public health threat, the fact that they're spending more time together, they're realizing, goodness, maybe there were things present that they hadn't addressed in their relationship that is more apparent now.
Yeah.
And so those things are coming up for them as well. And think about, I even have couples saying, we're both working from home now, so we spend a lot of time together. And I'll say, well, how much of that time is emotionally connected time? Just the two of you. And they'll say, well, gosh, we're not even really thinking of that. We're trying to find more time to go for a walk or be independent of one another because we feel like there's a lot of togetherness. Okay. So for starters, there's that. There's, kids too are feeling the effects of this. They hear the news, they're overhearing conversations in the home if we're not real careful. And at the end of the day, I don't think we give kids enough credit for really what they know.
Yeah.
Right. And so, parents are dealing with more behavioral issues with children in the home. The children, they don't have the outlets they once had, maybe to play with their friends and express their feelings. Kids often express their feelings and get their feelings out through play. Mm-hmm. And they haven't had a lot of those opportunities to do that. So there's more, parents are seeing more of that in the home.
Yeah.
So I think for starters, that's, and considering also when we're in that activated part of the brain, let's say going back to couples, it's the brain in a threat response reaction is also, again, not saying, hey, this is time to do pleasurable activities together. This is time to create, I mean, let's talk about even, we can talk about libido. Can we talk about that in the church? I
Yeah.
don't know. I would
Yeah.
encourage.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the brain's not telling us it's time to do pleasurable activities that procreate.
Right.
And so there's that. And couples are experiencing that and bringing those conversations into therapy as well.
Well, and someone mentioned, I don't know if it was on a news article, but I heard something to the effect that there was some people saying there's going to be a big baby boom right in the side because everyone's just home and what they said is, in fact, it's the opposite. There's a divorce boom.
Yes.
Because people, exactly to that point, they're actually not wanting to connect emotionally, sexually, whatever it might be. And they're actually wanting to say, hey, I'm now out, and we're seeing that, culturally. But I thought that was just a bizarre phenomenon that we assumed that they're big. Oh, we got nothing better to do besides, make babies, but that's just not what it's being like right now.
Yes, I would agree.
So one of the things that, and again, all these things probably are correlated and interrelated, but people who are struggling with anxiety and depression, that's one of those concerns that I have for a lot of people because, there's probably the loneliness and that can probably lead to some of these things. But what about people right now who are experiencing some really acute symptoms of anxiety, depression? How do you help people navigate some of those things? And I know that every situation is different, so we don't want to make blanket statements, but what are some things that, just general wisdom and advice you have about anxiety and depression in particular?
Yeah, for starters, if we just take anxiety, one of the things I think is so helpful is just fact-based reasoning. Okay. It's important that in our anxiety, we don't just choose to do things that feed our anxiety. It doesn't help. So, fact-based reasoning, things like, okay, if I'm fearful of this, I want to find facts for and against my fear. So it's no different than, and we certainly can use that for COVID. Okay, so it's no different than, I'll see individuals who are having anxiety related to driving after a major auto accident. And so what do they want to do? Initially, they want to avoid driving. They don't want to drive. So we look at, okay, how can I move my brain away from the fear that's causing anxiety? I look at things for and against. There's this interesting website even that my clients will go to, and it talks about, when they're dealing with anxiety of driving, it talks about, okay, how many cars are on Texas roads in a single day? How many accidents? So they're looking at the possibility and the probability so that we're not living in a state of just feeding our anxiety, but we're looking at facts. And we can do that with COVID too. I tell people, find a couple of trusted sources, use those.
Right.
Go to those sources rather than scrolling through, looking at a lot of different things, and look at facts for and against your fear that is feeding your anxiety.
So, no, that makes sense. So we're putting the problem into perspective, into a healthy perspective. We're not denying it, but we're also not going to allow it to totally just overwhelm us.
Yes.
And you're talking about anxiety. So help us to understand from a clinical perspective, because I would always look at those two things as interrelated. You talk about anxiety. Is that just feeling overwhelmed by things? How would you define that differently than depression?
So for simplicity's sake, one of the things I think is helpful for understanding the difference in depression and anxiety, while also understanding that a lot of times they exist together, right? But anxiety is more about living in the what ifs. What if this happens? Okay. Fear-based. Depression, a lot of times, is about living in things that have happened in the past. And again, understanding that a lot of times they coexist, and they do. But just trying to understand the difference in those. So for depression, one of the things we don't want to do in our depression is isolate. Right? Is creating that connection, reaching out to people, whatever that looks like right now. It may be having a family Zoom call. if they can't get together. It may be needing to do 30 minutes of bodily movement a day, maybe getting out and going for a walk when it's not so hot outside, right? But helping, not feeding the depression also by continuing to isolate.
Therein lies the challenge. And I don't think I've experienced a lot of depression personally, but I know people, and I have people close to me who have. One of the challenges is that depression it causes you to want to isolate, right? What are some tools for people who are maybe surrounding a person who we know struggles with depression, that you can let them know that you desire that connection with them, even if they don't want that, and being a source of, I don't even know if the right word is, how can I be there for someone who doesn't want me to be there for them?
Yeah. Well, and I think that is tricky, what you're describing. One, continuing to reach out and let them know that you care, that they're not alone. They don't have to do this alone. I really believe that, man, the human spirit can endure just about the most unfathomable pain as long as we know we're not alone in it. And so reminding them that they're not alone, inviting them out, maybe for a walk, meet you at the park, whatever you feel comfortable with, right? And then at the end of the day, you're right. You can't control someone's response to your attempts to reach out and support them. And I think it depends on the level of relationship too, where expressing your concern, for them being alone and continuing to be alone, finding things that, maybe you can share together, a cup of coffee, something that's enjoyable for them. And then not hesitating to say, I'm really concerned about you. What is your support system like right now? And are you talking to anybody about this?
And making yourself available, you're initiating the conversation, knowing that you can't control necessarily the other half of the conversation.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's very good. So kind of maybe thinking about things more practically, as we conclude. So what would you say in terms of practical tools, resources, do we all have that we need to be doing more of, just generally, whether we'd say I'm struggling immensely or not? What would you say that we all need to be doing more of right now?
Yeah. And so one, I would say more of activities that create connection. Again, that may be a Zoom call, checking in on people who can't get out. One of the things is gratitude is really, I believe, kind of the antidote to this threat response system in our brain too. Whether that means 20 minutes of journaling, a gratitude journal. Movement is so important right now. That activity, the physical activity, we need to be doing that. I mean, gyms were closed. I see a lot of people get really creative about how to keep up the momentum of that physical activity. Meditation. And I know you talked about this several weeks ago for yourself, and I appreciated that. But really starting out with, gosh, can I give myself 10 to 15 minutes to ask my brain to calm down, to sit quietly and be mindful of my surroundings, right? Noticing the things that we appreciate. One thing too right now I think is so important when you're working from home is taking the time to get dressed as if you were going to your office, keeping up those routines, that normal routine. And I see you smiling with that. So,
I'm wearing sweatpants. You can't see me, but I'm wearing sweatpants. And so
yeah. And two, spending more time with our kids right now. They're in this too, right? And through playing with the kids, you're probably going to see their feelings play out through play. And that's okay. That's the way they express their feelings a lot of times. So, gosh, I think focusing on safety, attachment, connection, um, what what are those things for you are so important right now.
We need to be doing more of it. And again, even in the hard, hard as it is, it's even more important that we do all of those things right now,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes, and self-acceptance, grace for self and others.
Right.
Notice, man, being out and about on certain days, um, people seem cranky right now in public places, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
having grace
Right.
for
For
them.
ourselves and for others.
Yes, yes. Hey, even if their political opinions are way different than ours too.
Yeah. No, I think that's very good. And again, just allowing ourselves that space, whatever that looks like. And then you mentioned the whole gratitude, and I was reminded of, Paul, right, in Philippians. He says, don't be anxious about anything, pray about everything. Thank God for what
Yes,
he has done, right? And so I think that whole being gratitude or being grateful, I think there's a lot of people right now. And again, I would even put myself in that category where I want to think about all the things I don't have, can't do, and
yes,
frustrated over, as opposed to all the things I am grateful for. And so I think that's, it has the added benefit of being exactly what scripture happens to tell us to do. And we see that
yes.
bear out even from a clinical background. It's like, yes, absolutely. These are the things that we have to be doing.
Yes. And I think included in gratitude is considering the opportunity in this.
Mm.
And so one of the things, opportunity, I was fairly new to my neighborhood and I had to get out and walk and take breaks and things. I've met my neighbors.
Yes.
I'm finally meeting some of my neighbors, and that's been really nice and made some connections that way. Um, my goodness, I've realized I like cooking, trying new recipes, found a couple of, considering the opportunity in some of this. I hear people saying they're doing home projects, being in their home more. They're realizing, gosh, I've been wanting to do this for a long time and haven't had the time. And now I'm home more and have the time to do these things. And so considering in that too, the opportunity that we
Absolutely.
have.
Well, yeah. And just, for, especially while we were in the middle of the shutdown, thankfully that that's behind us. But, I do remember we would be in our front yard almost every day, and we'd meet tons and tons of new people. And that really, especially for that time, that was really our community and network. Weren't able to see a lot of other people, but we could do that responsibly, and we would have that opportunity. So that was huge for us. We found that to be true for sure, and that was a great blessing for us. And again, that's going to continue on past all of this pandemic.
Right. Yes, I believe it will.
Yeah. So one thing I want to kind of maybe conclude with is just to talk about how people can engage with people like yourself, professional counselors, maybe some pointers about times where you might need to start looking to this. If you're experiencing X, Y, or Z, you need to be looking at professional help. But maybe you could just talk about how they could talk to you or someone like you in the community.
Sure. And so one of the things I think, if you're realizing, let's say the depression, anxiety is impacting your normal every day, okay? If it's impacting relationships, job, things like that, overall mood, and you're really just feeling like, gosh, I've tried everything I know to cope, and I don't feel like I am doing really well with this. Reaching out, there's a great resource. It's called psychologytoday.com, and you can put in specifically, you can filter it really specifically, whether it's, your insurance, you want to use your insurance, or it's a Christian therapist. You can put those things and filter it accordingly. And I think utilizing the pastoral team, you guys asking, hey, do you know anyone who can help me with this? But for starters, and then with couples, if you're feeling like, gosh, we're not doing a really good job resolving conflict and getting out of these difficult conversations, and they keep coming up, and we just need some help. getting unstuck, then reaching out, finding a therapist who specializes in marriage and family, and does marital counseling. So for starters, there's that. I just, the reason I named my company Truth Point Counseling is because I really feel like if we'll just be truthful, if we will just acknowledge the truth about what's going on in our life, put the truth out there, I believe we can invite God right in the middle of all of that. And he's so willing to jump in with us and
Truth
help.
will set you free.
The truth will set you free. Yes. Really cliche, but it's true.
It's
right?
true. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Are there any final thoughts or statements you would love to tell whoever is listening? Anything you want to share with us?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think how about just, I love the theme of grace right now and not showing up for everything you're invited to. And don't be afraid to reach out. Individuals are really feeling the impact of this, whether it's job related, finances, marriage, parenting, all of that. Just, gosh, yeah, please reach out. There are so many resources. We would be glad to help at any time.
That's awesome. And we'll have some information about how people can get in touch with you. And I know you have connections in the community as well. And so you're a resource as well. So,
Yes.
So we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us, Belinda. It's great to chat. And again, I hope that people will find this conversation to be helpful. And it's helpful for me. So I hope it's helpful for others as well. But thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.